Alright, I want to show you all 4 concepts for this week. First one is creating users in Windows 10. So I've got my Windows 10 virtual machine running here. So this is just a VM running in full screen. So to create users in Windows 10, it's a little bit strange, or there's a few steps to be aware of. So I'm going to click on Start down here. And what you want to do is click this little settings gear. And your version of Windows 10, it might be in a different place, but let's just hit settings. And we're creating users, but I think, at least in mine, it's going to be called family or something like that. So when this comes up, let's click this accounts spot. And then over here, to add additional users to this Windows 10 machine, I'm going to click this family and other people. And then from here, we should be able to just hit this little plus sign to add an additional user. I've already added some other users in the past on this machine. So I'm going to click this little plus sign. But this is where it gets a little strange, in my opinion. Windows 10 and Windows 8 did this as well. They want you to use like a Microsoft account, like a Hotmail account or something like that. We're not going to do that. We're just going to add local users to this machine. So when this screen comes up, it's asking you for an email or phone. Don't put that in. On this screen here, click down here where it says I don't have this person's sign in. So I'm going to click that. So again, I'm just adding a local user here. But even when you click that, it still takes you to another screen where it's asking you for an email. Notice it wants like a Microsoft One account or something. Don't fill that in. Again, we're trying to add a local user. So once again, down here at the bottom, click Add a User without a Microsoft account. Then it'll finally take you to a screen like we used to have in Windows 7 and prior, where you can just add a local user, put their name in, put their password in if you want, and add a new user to this machine. So now it finally takes us to this screen where all we have to do is put in a username. And if you want, you don't have to even put in a password. All you have to do is put in a username and hit next. If you wanted to assign this user a password, you could put in a password here and re-enter it there. So that's optional. So I've got this username in here. I'm just going to hit next. And that's really all there is to creating users in Windows 10. As long as you know how to get around those steps, that's all there is to it. So notice now on this screen it's got an additional local user, what they call a local account. Alright, so that concept kind of goes hand in hand with the next 2 things I want to talk about for this week's lab, and that is creating groups and setting permissions on files. So it wouldn't really make sense to do that if you didn't have more than one user on this machine. Real quickly, what groups are used for, they're very important. If you wanted to assign permissions, so let's say you were working somewhere, you were the local admin, and you had a department of employees with maybe 10 people in there, and you had assigned permissions for those 10 people to a particular file or particular folder. That can get tedious because you don't want to have to go on the file, add one user, then go on there and do that 10 more times. So the advantage of groups is you add all these people to a group, and then if you need them to have access to a particular file or particular folder, you just give permission to the group, and everybody in that group gets permissions. So since I have a couple extra users on this machine, I'm just going to leave this up because I'm we're going to need to know their names in a minute. So what I want to show you now is the groups part. So let's see how to create a group. Probably more than one way to do it, but I'm going to go to Control Panel. So I'm going to right click down here on the Start button and go to Control Panel. And to find the groups area, we're going to click System and Security. And then it's going to be under this Administrative Tools area. So down here towards the bottom, I'm going to click Administrative Tools. And to get to the groups, we're going to click Computer Management. So it was System and Security, Administrative Tools, and then Computer Management. So there's nothing that really says groups, you just got to know how to get to it that way through the control panel. Once this comes up, we'll see the area where we can add a group and add people to that group. Alright, so this is that Computer Management tool, which is used for a few things. But notice over here on the left, there's a Users and Groups area. So I'm going to expand that by clicking here. And since I want to create a new group, I'm going to right click on that, I believe. Yeah, and do New Group. So creating a group is pretty easy and straightforward as long as you know how to find this little spot. You just give the group a name. So I'll call these people the HR users or something. So maybe I've got an HR department, all these people work there, so I'm just going to create a group with that name. But we might as well, since we're creating the group, add some users to it as well. So on this same dialog, instead of just creating it, let's go ahead and add some users to it. And this is where we need to know those people's names. You'll notice if I hit this add button, we have to type their names in. There's no like lookup. I'm not sure why Windows hasn't added that yet. So I just added a guy named Zeke, so I can type that in. And once you type the name in, you can do check names, and notice it found it. If it didn't find it, it wouldn't auto-correct it like that. Let me try to add one more user to this group. I've got another person named Meg. I'm not sure if it matters if you have lower or uppercase. Let's try it. So in this little spot, I'm going to hit enter here. Oops. Okay, not sure what happened there. So I'm going to hit add again, add another person to this. I'm going to try to put uppercase Meg and see if it still finds it. Yeah, so it still found that user as well. Maybe you can only add one user at a time, I'm not sure. So I'm going to hit OK here. So we've kind of done two things there. We've created a group and we've already added some users to it. So that's it. Just hit create. And I'm not sure why this doesn't close. So if that happens for you, just go ahead and close this up. But now over here in the groups area, we should see that new group that we just created. And if we wanted, we could right click on it and go to properties and maybe add additional users to it or whatever. But at least we can now see, because it didn't really give us a verification, but at least we can now see that under groups there is that new group we just created. So the next concept I want to show you for the lab today is permissions. And it's kind of related to what we just did, but it really doesn't have anything to do necessarily with those groups. So don't think of this as directly related to what we just did. The permissions thing is just a matter of, again, if we have a couple users on this machine, maybe we can add permissions for a file for one of those users or even remove permissions. So that's the next thing I want to show you. So for this example, on my C drive, so I'm going to go into a little file explorer. I'm going to go to my C drive. On that C drive, I've got a folder called Just Testing. Here's why it's important that it's on the root of the C drive. Notice it's right on the C drive. If I create a folder out on my desktop or something, or create a file out there, and then try to give permissions to another user to have access to that file, it's not going to work because they don't have access to my desktop. So then I'm going to have to go and add them or give them permissions to my desktop and to folders above that. So rather than make that all complicated, if we just create something right on the root of the C drive, everybody can get to that. And then inside there I've got a couple files, and I can set some permissions for those other users for this file, and they should be able to access it or not access it based on that. So let's say we got this file here and we want to give permissions to I don't know, Mike or myself or some other users on this machine. The way to do that, or a way to set specific permissions on a file, I'm going to right click the file, go to Properties. It's kind of like the groups thing. You got to know 2 or 3 clicks to get to where you need to go. So when the Properties window comes up, we need to hit this Security tab here. And we're still not quite there. So to add or give permissions on this file, on this tab, I'm going to hit this Edit button up here. Notice it says to change permissions, so I'm going to hit Edit. And this is where we would add specific permissions for a particular user or group, in this case user, to this file. So to do that, you can hit Add here. And I'm going to give myself permission to this file. I'm a user on this Windows 10 box. You don't have to check names. You just type it if you know it's right. Just hit OK. If it doesn't recognize it, it'll tell you. Otherwise, notice now in this permissions area, I have some permissions. But that's kind of half of it. The other half is, I'm going to click on that, and I want to give myself full control. Because notice right now I've only got like some read permissions. So I've added myself to this file, but I'm going to go ahead and give myself full control by doing clicking this Allow box where it says full control. And notice now I have full read, write, execute, delete, all that kind of stuff. Alright. So I'm going to go ahead and add permissions to for another user as well. Hit Add again. I think there was a guy named Mike, so I'm going to put that in. You can check names if you want. Again, that's not necessary. Same thing. Alright, so Mike, if I want to give him full permissions or something, select him up here, and then do that. So I'm going to hit OK here. Well, one other thing I'm going to have you do in the lab, which is kind of important, is remove the inherited permissions. And the reason that is I think most people are in this users group by default, which has some permissions to this file. So if you didn't want all your users to have permissions, if you only wanted Keel and Mike to have permission, the one extra thing we need to do is remove inherited permissions. Alright, so we've assigned some specific ones. So the last step that you'll need to do in the lab is that inherited permissions, and the way to get to that is from this same Security tab, but this advanced button down here. So to add users, we did Edit. To do this inherited thing, we're going to click Advanced, disable inheritance, and do remove inherited permissions. Notice now we've got a very tight, clean permissions on this file. We have myself and that other person and nobody else with some inherited permissions that might have accidentally got permissions to that file that way. So I'm going to hit OK on that. And now notice only these 2 people have permissions to this file. So if I were to log out of this Windows 10 machine and maybe log in as Zeke and then go into this C drive and try to look at file 1, Only me and Mike would have permission to it, so you could probably see the file there, but if you try to double click it and go in and edit it or something, it would probably give you some kind of permission denied. Alright, now this one last thing I want to show you for this week is what's called a task scheduler, which again, as an admin, is a useful tool to be aware of. If you had some task that needed to run every night at 10 o'clock or every morning at 6 a.m., in the old days somebody would have to log on and run that task. Windows, since I think Windows XP, has something called Task Scheduler. So I just want to quickly show you how that works. It's just basically a way to make a program automatically run. So to get to Task Scheduler, there's more than one way to get to it, but I'm going to go to my Start button. And I'm going to scroll down almost to the bottom. I think it's under Windows Administrative Tools. So I think you can get through it through the control panel or some other way, but notice under this Admin Tools, if we scroll down, Task Scheduler is the thing I want to show you how to just set up real quick. So I'm going to click that. So if we want to create a scheduled task that ran, every Sunday night or every weeknight or something like that, we can do it from this little task scheduler thing here. So the way to do it, you just want to create a basic task here. So that's the one you want to click over here on the right side. And then basically it's just a wizard where you walk through. It asks you what you want to run, how often you want to run it. You give the scheduled task a name so that later you can maybe find it or delete it or alter it. Alright, so this is a little wizard here. First thing it wants is a name. So we'll call it, I don't know, Run Nightly or something. Then hit Next. This is depending on what you want to do. If you wanted to run it every day, you could leave daily. But let's say you only wanted to run on the weekend. What you'd probably do is click Weekly, and then I think if you hit Next, it'll let you choose the days. Yeah. So here you could choose the time and the days you wanted it to run. So if we only wanted it to run on Sundays, Saturdays and Sundays, we would choose a weekly task and then choose those particular days. And this is the time it'll run. So you could set that to 11 p.m. or whatever. You would set that here as well. Let's hit Next here. Typically you're going to start a program. You could have some program that you had written, or for the case of the demonstration, maybe we would just run Paint or Notepad or some program just to see how this scheduled task thing works. So leave that, start a program, hit Next. This is the only tricky part. It's going to need you, it wants you to point directly to the executable for that program. So you need to know where that is. So if you wanted to run Notepad, you would have to know where the Notepad exe resides. So you're going to hit Browse here, and we'll do Paint. We'll just say, okay, we'll run this Paint program every Saturday and Sunday. It's going to take you to System32, which is where a lot of those executables are. And this is a little tedious because there are tons of files in there. But I happen to know that Paint is called MS Paint. So I'm going to scroll down to the M's, and like I said, it gets a little tedious, but you gotta scroll through here till you find what you're looking for. So there's that executable file. So you just click on that, hit Open, and now it knows where to find that file. That's going to run automatically through this scheduled task. I'm going to hit Next here, and this is just kind of a review thing. So just hit Finish here. One last thing I'm going to have you do on the lab is see that you create that task. This little task scheduler window is a little bit confusing in my opinion. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to maximize this. And then over here where we have Task Scheduler Library, if I click on that, alright, sorry about that. Don't expand it. You don't have to expand it. If you just click directly on it is what I did. So it might look like this, but if I click on this folder, then we should see that scheduled task that we just created, including some details about when it's going to run and so forth. So that's how you can kind of review that scheduled task, or also go and edit it or delete it or whatever. One last thing, and that is if you create the task and then you click on this task scheduler and for some reason you don't see that task you just created, just right click in here, or maybe right click, better yet, just go up here to hit action and do refresh, and then anything you've just done should show up in this list.